Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy and Mike. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back.
Good morning, Mike. How are you? How was your weekend?
Doing well. Weekend was okay. It was just busy. Lots of things with the kids, doing different stuff, getting some stuff around the house done. We've had finally some good warm weather, so we've spent a lot more time outside than we usually do.
Yeah.
So I've enjoyed this. It's feels like summer is finally starting to get here. We'll see. It might still snow. It's Wisconsin.
You know, it's gonna snow a little in May, but it's only gonna be an inch. Nothing.
Then it'll melt and go away.
It'll melt, so I'm totally fine. We Mother's Day was this past Sunday, and it was just basically my wife and I were just on our deck, which was cicada free because you guys didn't have cicadas last year, right? In Wisconsin.
I think we did, just not nearly as bad as other places. Like we're in the band, I guess. When you look at the maps, we get some, but not a ton.
Which is crazy, especially how insane it was here. Like we lost half the summer being able to go on our deck that someone just built because how many bugs there were. So now we're like, oh,
wow,
nice. May's a great time of year to be outside.
Nice. Excellent. Well, enjoy that warm, sunny weather because the rest of your day is spent in the basement working on things and getting stuff done for clients. So I know how that game goes. You're in the studio most of the time.
Oh, yeah.
Which is funny. All right. Anyways, jumping into our main topic today. So our main topic for today will be talking an article through SQL BI. It's talking about the different tools in Power BI. And so we're probably going to need to react to this a little bit. Kurt Bueller wrote the article. There's a great comprehensive list of which tools can do what things, what can you do with various tools. And I kind of want to unpack some of this. I think there's a lot of interesting things that are outlined here. There's actually a lot of tools that are distributed across all these experiences. So yeah, I'm kind of really curious to see where we're going to take this one. There's a lot of information packed out on this one single, visual that they have going on here. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, and there's a few things I think we're gonna have some fun with.
We're going to debate a couple things on here, so we'll see where it goes. And also, I'm going to give you a little bit of a vision of where I'm going with some of my tools, things that I've built. So very exciting there as well. Awesome. That being said, let's jump over to some of our news for today, Tommy. What kind of news items have you found for us?
Two shortcut-based announcements by the Fabric team. So the first one is really awesome. We can now manage your shortcuts in a lakehouse. So shortcuts in one lake. Yeah, which is kind of odd that this hasn't been available.
You kind of had to make one and then use it. And then if you got it wrong or wanted to update it, you have to delete it and make another one.
And that's what I usually did. And I was okay with that.
Yeah.
Because how cool it was. But now they're like, you know what? We're going to add a little more admin to this. So what you can do is actually right click on the lake house or go to the lake house and actually manage all of the shortcuts.
Excellent.
And shortcut connections, because it is a connection. It's not, again, something which I was like you, Mike, very much going, I don't remember what I did that to deleting guys. Fine.
Exactly right. Yes. I think this is very, very helpful. A very needed added feature. This is like a creature comfort at this point. I mean, it was good before, but much better now. And again, this is probably an expected feature to be there anyways. Now, Tommy, is shortcuts out of preview or is shortcuts still in preview?
So I believe there are many things in shortcuts that are still preview in GA.
Yeah.
That's actually the shortcut caches are now GA.
Okay. So this is where it gets a little bit hard. So we say shortcuts, like not every feature of a shortcut is available yet or generally available. Some of it is, some of it isn't. So it's a little bit hard to know what feature is really out right now.
Yeah, I know there's that preview page, but there's a ton of stuff that Microsoft's putting on there. But shortcuts and the ability to cache a shortcut is GA. A shortcut?
Awesome.
I'm not sure if it's GA.
That's amazing. All right, we'll dig more on that a little bit later. If chat knows if shortcuts are GA, throw something down in GA. And I'm looking at the article right now. I'm trying to skim through. I'm just trying to figure out. It doesn't appear it's doing like a create a one lake shortcut. Kind of depends on what kind of shortcut you're trying to make. Looks like when I look at one lake shortcuts or ADLS Gen 2 shortcuts, those are kind of already released. It doesn't say anything about preview on those items. So I think shortcuts are GA. Just maybe some of the features are not quite GA yet.
Well, yeah, I'm gonna try to see if I can find that giant announcement that always has the what's new features in preview. I'll get back to that. Mike, have you tested out the managed connections yet? The shortcut, that new interface?
I haven't had a chance to go in there and manage the shortcuts yet. I need to start playing with those a bit more. One thing that we do a lot of work with is we manage a lot of shortcuts going directly to Databricks, or Databricks creates tables of data, and then our Fabric environment makes shortcuts to that gold layer of tables inside Databricks. So in doing that, because of that, that means we do a lot of API driven stuff. So we don't manage these shortcuts manually. We do a lot of it with automatic, talking directly to the Unity catalog, getting the information out that we want. We have been exploring using the Databricks Unity catalog connector to connect to the Unity catalog and get all those shortcuts out directly from the Unity catalog, which that's actually looking pretty promising. There's a couple of weird things around. Databricks does some weird stuff around materialized views. When Databricks says materialized, I'm learning this. When Databricks says materialized view, it is not the same thing as a Fabric materialized view. They are two different things, it seems like. So I got to unpack that a little bit more and understand a bit more. What's the difference between the two spaces? But you don't want to connect directly to a materialized view inside Databricks. You need a managed table to connect to. So we could physically point to the location. You have the storage account, and then you can go directly access the table right from the Unity catalog. So it's still a bit friction filled, I think, at this point, but it's definitely getting better for the two programs to kind of work together.
So for the record, about anything that's a shortcut that's in preview, there's a few things. It's not just shortcuts. So the things that
found the article.
Yeah. So Iceberg data, Fabric gateways with one lake shortcuts to be on premise. And
that makes sense.
Things with the event house. But for the most part, everything else, at least they have a feature about shortcuts, is generally available. SQL database, CI/CD. So that's good to know.
Start using it. Excellent.
Exactly.
All right. The other news article here is again, kind of along the idea of shortcuts here. This is the second half of this. There's another article. I'll make sure I put both of these in the chat window as well for everyone to go read up or check out these links as well. Here, so the first link I'll point out right now is the first article, managing connections. So manage connections is the first link, and then the second link here I'm going to share shortly will be all about the shortcut cache. So this is the shortcut cache to on-prem gateway support now is generally available. So Tommy, maybe unpack this feature. What is this kind of doing? What do we feel like this is doing right now?
It simply lets, when you do actually create a shortcut it's really two areas here. It's the shortcut cache and actually managing that. So you can actually say whatever the data is stored in that shortcut from a cache rather than being refreshed, you can actually set the time period or retention period. I think up to 28 days, I want to say, but I'm assuming a little more. And that's basically how whenever anything touches your public or APIs. The other part of this is on-premise gateway support with shortcuts is also generally available. So those are two separate kind of features, the shortcut cache and the on-premise gateway with shortcuts. So I don't know. I'm thinking about that with the shortcuts, and I'm trying to think of all the different use cases there, because if I can get the on-premise gateway and shortcuts, I mean, with all, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, are we doing too much? Because if we have all the shortcuts in my lakehouse, and then I'm going to create a shortcut from something in my gateway.
No, your shortcut in the gateway the gateway is just a connection back to your on-prem, right?
Yeah. So, but I'm saying, where does that shortcut actually live then? If I'm the on-premise gateway support for a shortcut. Do you see where I'm going with this?
I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Can you maybe refine it? Can you ask it a different way, maybe?
If I'm refreshing my data, right? And right now the on-premise gateway is really for your semantic models, right? It doesn't really do a ton with the lakehouse. Yeah, because notebooks is
shortcut doesn't Well, so there's a couple things. I think there's mirroring and there's like shortcuts. There's kind of two worlds that I'm looking at here. If you do a mirroring thing, some things that you mirror are moved into the lakehouse. Like if you mirror a SQL database, it's going to physically move like records into the lakehouse. Okay, I understand that one. But if you do like a Databricks mirroring doesn't copy the physical rows of data over from Databricks into the Databricks object. It basically just makes the shortcuts for you. And then you read back from the source. The data stays in Databricks in this ADLS Gen 2 storage account, and you read directly from that. Okay, also makes sense. So I'm under the impression that a shortcut on a gateway is you have data source information on the other side of the gateway on-prem, and then the gateway is just supporting the ability for you to real time go back and look at that on-prem information through the shortcut. That would be my understanding. So I'm not, again, I could be reading the feature wrong here, but I'm not envisioning that the shortcut is actually doing anything on the gateway other than the gateway is holding the connection. And then when your semantic model needs that information or you're reading, like, so the table lives in the lakehouse, but it's a shortcut. There's not data underneath that shortcut. It's just a link back to like, oh, by the way, this is where you would go get the data from. Oh, it just happens to go through the gateway and then back to the on-prem solution. Again, the example they give here is they have a cache. So I think there's also some things here too. The example is, let's say you have a semantic model or a Spark job reading something from the lakehouse. I believe the caching portion of this is, let's see here, we're talking about shortcut. Yeah, okay, shortcut cache. So here's how I read this. You have a table in their example, S3. The S3 table slowly changes, maybe once a day, maybe once a week. It changes every so often. The cache basically is able to, the shortcut is letting you read that table, putting a cache, and I don't think the cache lives on the gateway, it would live in the lakehouse. The lakehouse would say, look, I'm going to cache the data here, just take a temporary storage of that table. And that way, as long as you're trying to read the information, it's super fast. You're going right from data sets right to the lakehouse. The cache is then being used to hydrate the data. You're not having to refresh the data all the time. So caching, I think, makes a lot of sense in this realm. And only when the S3 container changes, then does it go say, oh, actually, I need to go back to the source and go get it again. So it wouldn't make sense if you had like 10 semantic models and then each one of them are going all the way back to the source, back to S3 every single time to go get the data. It would make sense you'd want to cache the data, have it cached in the lakehouse, and that just feels more efficient to me. Does that make sense what I'm describing there, Tommy?
No, that's perfect. And I think the reason I was confused is there's only 3 data sources for the shortcuts and on-premise supported too.
Sure.
So it's only Amazon S3 compatible, and Google Cloud.
Yes.
So.
And again, I think the idea here, the gateway is like, look, you have data that's not in Azure. It's like a non-Azure related thing, right? And so the gateway is involved in that exchange of security, right? We have to put the gateway inside AWS to go connect to those things. And again, I think the other concept here is you need, if you had on-prem data, right, it has to be in an S3 compatible storage system, right? So you could put data directly on-prem, but an S3 storage format is what you need to use in order to leverage this shortcutting with caching through the OneLake or through the lakehouse. So that's how I interpret it.
No,
interesting feature. I don't know how much it's going to be. I mean, someone's probably asking for it. I'm probably not just going to be heavily using that. I'm probably going to be more focused on just moving my data directly to the lakehouse in general. All right, let's go to our last topic for today. Announcing Copilot for SQL Analytics Endpoint. What do you think about this one, Tommy? How about this announcement?
So now that we have support for Copilot for all of us, and it's for all the people now, this is something that I think it just needs to be part of everything. And I know the expectation, and I'm going to sound bratty, but I mean, it should be pretty easy for auto completion in every part of Fabric. I know it's a big deal with the announcement. I'm super stoked about it, but it's like, come on, like we're dealing with just code here, regardless if it's a SQL endpoint or a database or a lakehouse. Common things I should be able to try to do in Copilot. I get we're treating different models, But again, none of these co-pilots are touching in a sense or really looking at my data in a sense of or scanning it unless it's a data agent. So it should be very quick to implement. So this is just honestly, are we getting to the point where these co-pilots and AI is just the expectation now?
Oh, that's interesting you go there, Tommy, because I was going to actually make a note around this one on this particular topic. More and more, whenever I buy a program or look at a program, I'm expecting, I think we're hitting a moment where if you don't have something that's AI based as part of your application, you're missing the boat. Like there's becoming, to me, there's an expectation of like, simple things like generating images or having, anytime I'm writing text for things, almost every single one of my tools that I use nowadays has some sort of rewrite with AI, do something with AI. There's these little nuggets here that are like just refinements, right? It's almost like having a second set of eyes to read over whatever you're doing. And I really think there's something to that. There's definitely something that is very much important around that. It's becoming an expectation, I think. Now, we may be seeing this expectation a little bit earlier than other people, but just because we're in the tech space, right? We're in places where there's a lot of code. It makes sense to put agents and copilots against those things. So now I'm actually looking for, if I have a program that I'm using and it doesn't really incorporate AI, I'm actually looking at the program going, man, they could put AI right here, or I'm writing a lot of text in this area. Maybe Copilot should be written over there. It's becoming very common, I think. The expectation is being set.
Dude,
Does it make sense?
I'll do you one better. Not only am I expecting an AI tool in most things now, whether it's Confluence or Cursor or whatever, I'm expecting it to be good. And there are a few out there where I'm like, I know you have an AI tool. I know you're calling this an agent, but
Sure.
this is not helping me. And it's frustrating too, because we also are getting to the point too where we're familiar with an expected output with a lot of these things, regardless if it's code or documentation or write a thing. And so, honestly, with Copilot and Fabric, because all the actions that it's being able to, simply go through and, like I said, like help me do autocomplete, help me see what I can do next.
Yes.
I know they are working with being able to, with the SQL Analytics endpoint, to actually go over your data and actually understand the schema. So like they're saying basically some of the questions that you can ask, it is basically like, hey, show me total revenue. So
well, one thing I'm interested in finding is I don't think the agents are going to be. So I just started playing with data agents slightly, just trying to get into a model and started to play with some of the data. Not super impressed with my initial reaction to data engines. I tried it. I got a couple major errors right at the very beginning. It did a little bit of something. And to your point, Tommy, I was looking at some of the usage on it. Like every time I was submitting prompts, very quickly looking back on the usage, back on my capacity metrics app. I mean, when I was using it, I was running it at around whatever prompts I was sending in. 100 to 400 CUs was used every time I submitted some sort of prompt. So that's a pretty good amount of compute units because I run a pipeline every night, and it's like the pipeline runs in one day. It loads a series of data, and it runs for maybe 4,000 CUs every night, kind of thing. It's just kind of this slow bleed of things. So I'm trying to get my feet kind of ready. Like, what does this look like? What's the impact going to mean to me? One thing I've been doing a lot that's free that I don't have to pay for is in my Chrome or my Edge browser, I have a Copilot attached to that. There's literally Copilot attached to that. So I go right there and I click on the Copilot and just talk to it, open it up. I don't need to actually use it in the experience that's given to me through Fabric. I can actually use the browser version of Copilot. Yeah. So I find I'm often spending time trying different Copilots now. So this is one thing that I think is a little bit not misleading, but I wish it would do a little bit better. When I use VS Code Copilot, I can pick from a multiple of different engines or different models, right? So right now I have my Copilot and my VS Code up right now. I can use Claude 3.5 Sonnet. I can use Claude 3.7 Sonnet. I can use Gemini, which I believe is Google's version. And then there's OpenAI GPT 4.1, GPT 4.0 and 4.0 mini. It's in preview. So there's all these models I can go pick from, and I can manage additional models if I wanted to. I could go to Anthropic. I could go to things in Azure. I could add Grok as well. So there's other, you can add APIs to different things and add them to VS Code. I kind of feel like that's what I need, because maybe Microsoft is making the best decision on which AI to use. Maybe they're using Gemini to write SQL. Maybe they're using Claude Sonnet to write. I don't know. Like, I don't know which one they're picking. And so for me, the user, I feel like I get stuck occasionally. Like, I write a prompt, the AI tries to answer a question, and I don't understand it, or it doesn't solve it correctly. And I think at that moment, I'm almost like, I'd like to try a different engine, maybe the same prompt on a different large language model. What do you think, Tommy?
No, I completely agree, because I think right now Copilot in Fabric there's 8 Copilots, but really there's one persona I think they're reaching out to there. And it's just kind of like that general, like, hey, we're going to be a general Copilot, be a general agent for general questions and generally answer things.
Yes.
Because they, depending on the skill level. What I'm looking at here, Mike, and this is different with other Copilots, is with the SQL Analytics endpoint. And I'm trying to find this in the documentation, is not only can I do code completion and like, how do I do something, but it's saying, hey, you can actually look at your SQL endpoint and you can actually generate the SQL query, like, hey, get customer orders from a CRM with fulfillment data. And it should be, would spit that back out. But the thing is, compared to you or me, like, I can't necessarily say, hey, I'm really in depth, I'm an expert Fabric developer, I know what I'm doing, so help me with advanced things. Compared to, I'm a business user and I just want to look at data, is the same Copilot. So I think you and I are probably getting more frustrated or not getting the results we want, because it's kind of saying, hey, you probably don't know what you're doing, or you're very general. So yeah, regardless of the model it's using, it's just right now, the only customization is Copilot Studio, but that doesn't touch Fabric. So it's kind of frustrating from a Microsoft customization.
Yeah, and that's
I really need us, just like with automated insights, man. Like, they got to give the ability for people to be able to wait and customize their Copilot for their organization, or model it themselves.
I think so, a little bit, yes. And what we're going to probably talk about today as well is, where does Copilot is going to start eating some of these external tools and helping you build with them as well. So, there's this idea of like, so some of the things that I really like is, I like being able to be critical of what the AI is doing. Right. I like being able to see that it's doing some work. I can actually give it a lot of simple things to do. Hey, write general descriptions for everything. And then I can review the output of the results of that. That's where I think a lot of these Copilot things work well for me. I've been doing a lot of experimentation with, like, building websites, building applications, building UI experiences with Copilot and agents. And I'm quite impressed. Like, it's amazing how much the agents are doing things for me. And then also, I would go back to, I was watching through YouTube. I was just scrolling through YouTube Shorts, and I saw a conversation between Mark Zuckerberg and Satya Nadella. And Satya Mark basically asked him, I said, how much of your code is probably being generated by AI? And so Satya's metrics were saying Microsoft is roughly seeing 25 to 35% of the AI doing code writing generation for them. And it's getting it pretty accurate, and they're able to use it in their programming. So particularly with Microsoft, can you imagine that, Tommy? 20 to 30% of your company should be. So I'm just looking at this going from a standpoint of, like, what tools should I be providing to my team to help them build things? Yeah. And 25 to 35% of my code, or things that I'm trying to be technical, like detailed build things, should be starting to get built by AI. This is a really big game changer, and your teams need to start figuring out how to use this to their advantage.
And honestly, man, and here's the thing though, too, that skill is that really that prompt engineering or understanding. It's not just being able to sit and chat with it. So I'll give you a really good example. Over the weekend,
Sure.
So one of the things that has always bugged me with command line tools is like autocomplete in suggestions. And there's this great article by someone who's more of a developer, but basically I have a old GitHub repo with custom instructions or rules that are basically set up that is kind of dedicated to, you're going to write Python with these dependencies. And guess what it's done for me? It's written for me a PBI tools autocomplete. So basically, it's written. So I have all of these now shell-based tools, but it's because you got to understand how to, in a sense, get to that point where it's going to get you what you want. But we don't have that ability right now with Copilot and Fabric.
Yes.
So, well, dude, I think it's time to get into the tools.
I think it's time to get into tools now. I think we've been talking about a specific tool, but let's talk about all the other things. And I hope on this list that Kurt gives us, I hope there's a Copilot on here somewhere. I didn't even check for it actually. He doesn't even have Copilot on here.
Yeah, there's
Copilot. Where?
It is far down. Oh, maybe not. He's got LLM tools like Copilot.
Okay. Maybe LLM tools is where he's lumping that in there. Okay, maybe that's where he's going with it. Okay. Anyways, this is where I think there needs to be a Copilot item on here as well, probably at some point. Maybe LLM tools is what he's looking for. All right. Anyways, let's undrop the article here. So let me drop the full article. This is from SQL BI. This is their tool assessment, which is kind of interesting here. And let's kind of unpack. What do you think, Tommy? What's your looking at this one at your initial blush of where these tools are going and which tools are doing what things? What do you think? What do you see here going on?
So, I mean, Kurt basically broke it down to first with let's break it down, not just random tools, but the life cycle of building a Power BI model and report. You're going to design, build, test, deploy, manage, optimize, monitor. Those are your basic, phases. And with that, he kind of basically categorized the main tools and where they fit into that. Which ones are more for reporting, which ones are based on some of those phases, which ones are report, and which ones are more semantic based tools. We have, and I'm actually looking at the list right now, well over 20 outside of Power BI desktop, not Microsoft built applications. And all of these are, some of them are standalones for Windows. Some are just the web. Some are custom visuals. But these are all things that go through that different life cycle. And the crazy thing is, I would say the majority of them are semantic model based tools. I think only a few of them are just for solely for report and design. And Mike, we got a lot of tools over the years. It started with external tools. That's where kind of this whole idea or this whole initial seed came from. And now we have Tableau Editor, Bravo, Analyze in Excel, PBI tools, Vertipack Analyzer. We have things like Power Designer, which is the theme generator. And I don't know, man, there's a lot of tools. I know well and above a lot of these and familiar with them. But that being said, Mike, this is like your worst nightmare, I feel like, or this is the thing that when it comes to so many choices here for tooling, this is almost like I don't want to say what's the word I'm thinking of? This is something I see you easing concern or urging concern on, with just the fact that there's so many tools out there. Do you like that there's over 25 independent tools out there?
Well, let me say this. So of a lot of these tools, so let's talk about these tools that are out here. Power Designer, which is one that I'm familiar with. That's one we build. Tabular Editor, Bravo, Analyze in Excel, DAX Studio, PBI Tools, ALM Toolkit, Vertipack Analyzer, Measure Killer, PBI Explorer, PBI Inspector, DAX Optimizer. All of those tools, maybe with the exception of DAX Optimizer, I'm not sure if DAX Optimizer is actually in my tool. All those can be installed with one tool. I'll just point out. So this is one of the things I saw very early on was this proliferation of random tools that you were going to need to go figure out how to build things with. And so looking at all these different tools to build, test, optimize, develop things, when I look at the spectrum of all those tools, you can actually download and use almost all of them with Business Ops. So Business Ops is a tool that I've produced to help you install all these different tools. And so I'll put the link here for those of you who do not know what this is. But we've been continually updating and keeping our business ops tool up to date, current, versioning all these items today currently. So you can get all this down. We're at version 3.1.5, and we've just been really kind of keeping the tool experience up to date. So I'll just put that out there right now. If you want to get a lot of these tools and test them out very quickly, you can easily do that with business ops. So I'll just point that out there. To your point though, Tommy, this having lots of tools like this indicates to me like there's something missing in the raw part of the product potentially, right? When I look across these tools, when I would expect that the tool that Microsoft builds, right, Power BI Desktop should be able to do all these things. If not very well, it should be able to do everything, right? So the one thing here and one of these that just boggles my mind is, why isn't Power BI Desktop part of the deploy option, right? Power BI Desktop does have some level of optimize as well. So I'm not sure. So to me, when I look at this chart here, on the very bottom, they have Power BI Desktop, they have DAX Query View, Tyndall Editor. Okay, fine. Those are more about authoring experiences. And then there's a Performance Analyzer pane for query limit simulations. Okay, fine. But there's also like Optimize. You do have the Performance Analyzer pane in general. Why wouldn't that be something around optimizing? I don't know why that doesn't exist. And now that Copilot kind of exists inside in the web creation experience, can we not use Copilot against a semantic model to talk to it yet? Like, that's like, optimize this model, optimize these measures. So I'm not sure I really agree with the optimize portion of this. Even inside VS Code, with Visual Studio Code does a lot of these things. It can create models, it can build reports, it can do a lot of these things as well. But I just feel like there's something missing here. The whole desktop version of this just seems to be underrated to what it needs to be called.
So
does that make sense?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because have you noticed too in the web, really neat feature now, if I go to semantic model, I can do the best practice analyzer or view the performance of that semantic model. And there's these two like new buttons. You're like, oh, that's neat. And they are notebooks. Mm-hmm. To your point. So, I mean, yeah. So Power BI does some of these things fine. Like the performance analyzer is good, but you can't.
Where's Semantic Link Lab? Like where's Semantic Link Lab on this one? Like Semantic Link Lab does all this stuff, right? Semantic Link Lab can design reports. Semantic Link Lab can build reports. Semantic Link Lab can test things. Like
designing reports, that's a little far walk to say it can design reports. Sure. Can it change the colors and the visual of a report? Sure. But is anyone actually in their workflow going to prefer to use Semantic Link Labs or be more proficient at it at this time?
Well, I don't know. I mean, this is the point of like extending things with code. Right, so this is another one here that I don't see on this list that I think would be very useful to put there. There again, what also throws us for a loop to me as well is there's a mix of like, okay, what are we talking about? The report side? Or are we talking about the semantic model side? Right. So all these tools have two different kind of patterns to them. Right. I think they should have been grouped into, these are tools that are model based tools, and these are tools that are report or visual based tools. And to me, those are two things that are different, right? Those are two different worlds in this report. So to me, it should be broken down into two separate sections. You're focusing on the model and you're focusing on the report. Because I think tools are built in two different patterns that way. And then maybe you have a section where, okay, look, here are some tools that actually do both, right? Power BI Desktop being the one I would say would be doing both. It does a lot of modeling as well as it also does a lot of report building. So that would be one tool I would say you'd have to have that in both sections.
You may want to scroll down on our agenda, my friend, because he does break it out that way. And again, thanks to our lovely LLMs, it makes it a nice table. But yeah, and it is broken out that way. So he does have tools that support semantic models, not necessarily better for that, but that it supports it. And then tools that supports reports or tools that do both. And the majority of them are semantic models. Tableau Editor, like you said, DAX Studio, Vertipack Analyzer. It's funny, if you just took, Mike, the old school, the original three to me of external tools: Tablet Editor, DAX Studio, Alum Toolkit, right? Back in the day, they were pretty more or less required, or at least one of them was, if you were going to do anything advanced. To me, and where we still are now, if you were to say what's required, like if everything else from the DAX optimizer, which is, to me, it's a nice to have. The data generator is nice to have. I really wouldn't put that in here. The DAX date template is nice to have, but I'm not recommending for people to use DAX dates. I'm going to tell them you're going to need to have a master date.
Sure.
We still have the main three, but I think the only one that, I think to your point, Tyndall is not here, but it's a language.
Well,
right?
Yes and no. There's the Tyndall view that is used, and Tyndall view can be used in multiple places. So the Tyndall view is a desktop feature that lives only in desktop. It's not in the service yet. But then you can also use a Tyndall-like view that's a language, and you can get that in VS Code. So like pattern reusing, so there's some things here that I think are also a bit misleading a little bit, because I mean, again, I'll argue all day long, they've commandeered Power Designer and put us in the only create theme files. Well, that's not all that it does. It doesn't just create theme files. It creates theme files. It also creates wireframes. It also creates pages. You can build a full report without any data in it. So I'd also argue Power Designer should also be part of the create wireframes or create mockups of reports. That's part of that solution.
I don't know why Figma was the big one there.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue Figma's okay, but that could be PowerPoint. That could also be,
exactly.
Paint. It could also be, Figma is a very complex tool for building report design or graphics. It's amazing. It does a great job. I've never heard of Excalidraw, so I don't even know what that means. I haven't even checked out that. So that's one I would probably want to check out on my own. But what about Canva? What about Adobe Express? I think those are also tools that are very good at building background images for pages. So I think those are also really, really good experiences for helping you to wireframe out or mock out what a report might or might not look like. Just some other options there as well. So I do think there are some really interesting points later on in the article. So I do like the fact that Kurt goes through a section here and he starts talking about the different areas he's talking about, design, build, test, deploy, manage, optimize, and monitor. I do think these are really important to call out, because I do think this is part of the progression of people and how they learn how to build Power BI. I think a lot of times you start focusing on the build first, but you don't really spend a lot of time doing the design work. I think you do a lot around deploying and managing stuff, but you really don't do a lot with optimizing, monitoring, and testing until later on. So I think there's a maturity portion of this that not every tool is needed at every point in journey of your user's journey, essentially. So I was curious your thoughts there, Tommy. What do you think about the different sections and using them at different times?
So first off, I'm glad I'm still here, because my browser almost said, do you want to kill the page? But we're still here. So the beauty of Alive. But from what I did hear from you about kind of breaking them up, Mike, honestly, there are 25 cool tools here, and I've used them all. But in my normal workflow, I use 3 of them. Truly.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing. Well, if I believe, if you get your question again, so.
But what tool, so if you're using a couple of tools, I would argue in the beginning version of in your beginning world of working with Power BI and tools, you would focus more on building, deploying, and maybe managing, right? Those are maybe your 3 things. There's 3 topical areas that you would actually spend more time around. Everything else is not there. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't use. I didn't initially start with the design. I didn't initially start with testing things. I didn't initially build optimizing or monitoring. So the tools that I think I focus more of my attention around is all around the build, deploy, and manage in my early career. And then as I got better, as I got more knowledge over time, I spent more time building out design things, building out test elements. I found that made a better impact on my reports. And then as I got to scale, when we started deploying things out to large organizations, then I needed to have optimizing and monitoring. So that's when I started doing those later on in my career. Would you kind of agree with those steps as well, Tommy?
And, yeah. And honestly, it's the same. Like I did test everything out. Like DAX Studio, it's good and it's a good training course, but I think the only people that when you really need that is if I already have Tableau Editor. And you have a really good point about everything that's going on with Tyndall. Whether or not I am completely on board with it yet, I still love Tableau Editor and I still like some of the other workflows, but Tyndall for you can take away a lot of the descriptions in Tyndall or Editor. You can write your measures in it and you can use VS Code. That's a huge win.
All right, Tommy. Well, you're breaking up pretty bad now. It looks like your computer's not going to be happy. So we're going to probably end this episode a little early because your computer's not working. So we'll kind of wrap it there. I will recommend go jump in, check out the article from the SQL BI team. I'll put that down here in the description below. Go check out the SQL BI article. It is SQLBI.com, Tools in Power BI. With that, we want to thank you very much for joining the episode today. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining the episode today. Sorry for some technical issues here towards the end. We hope you go enjoy the article. Go figure out some things that you like to use and tools. There's actually a lot of good recommendations and tools out there. Check out some tools you haven't seen before. Go adjust or look at a couple as well. With that being said, thank you so much for watching the podcast, and we'll see you next time.